Sonic Lab
TV.
Hello, welcome to another Sonic Lab. That's the sound of the Studio Logic Sledge. So the Sledge is an 8-voice virtual analog polysynth. It's got one monotimbral, so it can only play one sound at a time, but it has got a lot of control. It's a collaboration between Studio Logic, who are an Italian keyboard manufacturer, do a lot of keybeds for other manufacturers, and Waldorf. Waldorf provide the synth engine. In fact, it says engine by Waldorf right here. There's been a lot of speculation as to what that engine is. It's actually not a specific Waldorf engine. It is the result of a collaboration, apparently, between Studio Logic and Waldorf, so it's not the same. It's very similar to the Blofeld, but it's not exactly the same. So first of all, it's kind of egg yolk yellow, perhaps a little bit oranger, sort of school bus yellow if you're in the States. It's a plastic case. It's quite solid, but it's not, you know, you can tell it's plastic. The knobs are okay. They're a little bit wobbly, but once again, there are an awful lot of them. The keybed is a 61 key synth action keybed, and it's got aftertouch, which is nice to see in any kind of keyboard I find these days. And I'll be honest, it's not the best feeling keyboard I've felt, but it's okay. The thing that's been sort of controversial about this is that all the connections around the side. So we've got audio left and right, headphones, expression pedals, MIDI I/O and USB. USB's handy because we can hook up to the computer and use it as a controller keyboard. In fact, all of these knobs will output MIDI CC, so it could be very useful for controlling other synthesizers and keyboards too. So let's take a look at the front panel and you'll be able to see how the synthesizer is laid out. So starting over here, we have the control section. This has got a numeric keypad, ARP, MIDI, global buttons, up and down patches, data increment and push value next, OK. Very, you know, for getting around. Master volume, mono and poly mode with trigger, single and multiple. Then we've got glide, which will give you glide in poly and mono modes. Then we've got a modulation section, 3 of them, 2 LFOs. And the mod wheel. LFOs can be various different waveforms: sawtooth, square, triangle, sine, sample and hold and ramp. And then the destinations can be the 3 oscillators, the pulse width, or the wavetable, volume and cutoff, and depth, positive and minus. Same for the wheel. Then we come on to the oscillators. Oscillators are quite interesting because they have a very wide range, starting at 64 feet. Going up to 1 foot, which I haven't seen in a synth range. I don't know if you're able to hear that when it's compressed. I can't hear that anymore, so it goes right the way up. And then that's kind of cool. Square. Whoops. Triangle. Sine. And pulse width, which you can modulate. And then the wavetable, which are all the original waves from the PPG, so I'm told, it says in the manual. 100 positions. You can modulate this either via the LFO or the mod wheel, which is kind of cool. Second oscillator and third oscillator are slightly different, still got the same range, but they've only got 2 waves. If I switch that, saw, square, and then FM by oscillator 1 of triangle and sine, and then a pulse width which we can modulate. Both of those. Mixer section, got the volumes of the 3 oscillators which you can switch on and off. Then you've got a noise source which gives you pink and white. Then we're on to the filter, which is a multi-mode filter. We've got low pass, high pass and band pass. Get a bit of resonance in there. It will self-oscillate. Then we've got high pass, which again will oscillate, and band pass. All these filters available in 24 and 12 dB. Right, go back to the low pass filter, 24. We can also drive the filter which adds a sort of smudge to it, which is not all that, it's not quite as nice as the real analog thing, but it's again nice to have that parameter. Then we've got a filter envelope dedicated, which is quite snappy. So you can get some fairly fast action there. Then amplitude envelope with velocity sensitivity. So you can bring a little bit of that in there. Then we've got the two effects sections. We've got a chorus, which is actually pretty nice and adds quite, these is where you add the stereo width. It's actually quite a nice sounding chorus and very stereo. Phaser and flanger. Then we've also got delay reverb, so if we go to reverb, a bit digital, but it does work, and a delay, which I think is just a straight mono delay. Sounds like about 600 to 700 milliseconds to something fairly short. Now, oscillators aren't the fattest ones I've ever heard, but they're certainly okay, you know, and the thing about this is what you find you do is you sort of don't care because you just get stuck in and start playing with the front panel, and you know, the way that it's laid out, it just really is, there's so much space, and yes, it is very familiar to the kind of those of you who might know a Mini Moog with the mixer section or whatever. The only thing that I found was the filter suite being there. If I'm playing with this hand, it's just not quite, I like it somewhere around here because then you could interchange it, but you know, as an ergonomic thing, I suppose I could live with that. So once you've been playing around with it for hours, which you are encouraged to do just purely because there's so many knobs and it really is great fun, you do start to notice there are a few synthesis limitations in terms of routing. For instance, I can't find a way to map velocity either to the filter cutoff or the filter envelope amount, which is something that you would use quite a lot for expressivity and those sort of sounds which give you a lot of a touch feel. So that's a little bit disappointing. You can, however, route the filter via aftertouch or the mod wheel, but it's not immediately obvious. And one thing that is worth noting is the aftertouch and the wheel are the same thing. Basically, whatever you have assigned to the wheel is the same as what's assigned to aftertouch. They're not two separate things, but I'll show you quickly because it's a little bit confusing in the manual. If we take straight sawtooth end sound here, let's add a little bit of interest to it. Bit of detune. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the wheel, which I've got set here. I'm going to select ramp, which is not all that intuitive, and I'm going to set the speed to 127 and the depth to 127. I'm going to map it to the cutoff there. Now I'm going to bring my filter down, and now my wheel will affect the cutoff, as does the aftertouch. If I was going to do it to oscillators 1 and 2, I probably need to take that bend, but then it's also aftertouch. Now I don't know whether it's possible with a software update that you might be able to access additional routings via the menu system, but you know, there are some other really interesting tones and sounds you can get by modulating other parameters. We'll just take a quick look at those now. Now I've got a simple pulse width waveform here, which I'm going to use LFO1 to route to the pulse width. I can get a nice thing going here. One thing you will notice though is that I haven't got LFO sync between notes, so when they start to drift out of each other, which is a nice effect if you want it, but if you don't want it, there's nothing you can do about it. So coming back here, now we'll bring in oscillator 2. Which I've got tuned to a high metallic sound. Bring that more in tune. Now if I make that to be frequency modulated by oscillator 1, getting some interesting stuff going on there. Let's bring oscillator 3 in. Oh, that's nice. I'm getting, just with that one, I'm getting some nice bell tones. Put a bit of chorus on it. And again, you can start to see nice complex tones, but it would be great if I could just modulate the semitone value of this with that. And you know, that's where the routing possibilities kind of end, and that's a little bit disappointing. There's another feature which is not very well documented in the version of the manual I've got, and that sort of came about by me trying to answer a question by Robert Fatdust Heck on Facebook. So thank you very much for that. And that is, can it make OB fat brass sound? So I'm going to have a go at that. So what I've got here is a single oscillator, sort of brassy, sawtooth sound. Now I'm going to use the ramp function. Now the ramp function is essentially a single cycle. So it means rather than a whole waveform cycle, it's just a single cycle. So what I've got to do is, this is the speed of the cycle and this is the depth. So it's now got a bit of a pitch on just one oscillator, so I have to tune. So now I've got So now I've got one of the oscillators sort of swooping up, which makes it kind of feel more brassy. So I don't know whether that sounds like an OB brass, but that's as close as I can get. And I've got the pitch wheel mapped to the filter. So we should also take a look at the USB aspects of this. Obviously we have the USB cable. It's MIDI only, there's no audio. So I'm just using a handy little utility called MIDI Monitor here on OS X to show you that there's an input and there's the notes. And we've also got the controllers that are coming off the knob and the channel pressure, which is the aftertouch. Now, it would have been great if we could have had more access, more ports, even the MIDI I/O port and the synth engine as separate ports. Even better to be able to have the keyboard and the controls as two separate MIDI sources, so we could have done some fancy routings there. That would have been great, but it really is very simple. It is class compliant, it's just one in, one out. You can switch on and off the sending of control data from the front panel of the synthesizer, but that's your lot. So the Sledge certainly is an impressive looking instrument. It has full range 5-octave keyboard, lots and lots of knobs, plenty of oscillators, all of those things. It has also quite a characterful sound. I'm not familiar with the Waldorf sound, and while it's not the biggest and beefiest, it certainly has a character which I quite enjoy. Where I think it's let down really is only in the kind of the more intricate synthesis functions, some of which I think, you know, should have been there, like filter, envelope, velocity, sensitivity, those sort of things add to an expressivity for an instrument like this. But some other ones that would have been just great to access maybe via a menu or via an editor, that may in fact come along in the future, I cannot say. The price of it is just under £800, $779 I've seen it for online. So it's, you know, it's not an inconsiderable amount of money, but it is quite a lot of synth. I suppose you could really, you know, it's in the same category as the Roland Gaia, which is around about 500 or 600 quid. So a couple of £100 more, but you've got sort of more real estate, larger keyboard, and I think it sounds better, to be perfectly honest, but the Gaia does have a few more synthesis options that this doesn't have. But I can't think of any other kind of large format virtual analog synthesizers in this price bracket, and I really have enjoyed having it around. I think maybe I might wait until the price has dropped a little bit, because I do think it's just a tiny bit expensive for what you get.